Ryan Mathers had lived on his family farm for nearly a decade, just outside the Oak Crest Estates subdivision. The land had been in his family for 3 generations, 5 acres of pasture, woods, and a barn that leaned just enough to give it character. When Oak Crest sprung up next door with its pristine sidewalks and power-washed driveways, Ryan kept to himself. His property sat just outside the HOA line, and that was just fine by him. But peace ended the moment he saw them. 2 women in matching sun hats were walking through his backfield like they owned it, cutting across from Oak Crest's cul-de-sac straight through his pasture. Ryan set down his coffee and walked off the porch. "Hey," he called out. "You are on private land?" The women slowed, one waving casually. "We're just taking a shortcut." Karen said, "It's fine." Karen who? The HOA president, the other said. "Like that settled it." Ryan frowned. "That fence you just crossed, it keeps my livestock in. You leave it open. And I've got cows on Route 9. But the women barely acknowledged him. "We're just walking," one replied with a tight smile, before slipping through a narrow opening in the wire fencing and disappearing into the woods behind his pond. Ryan stood there, stunned. He didn't know much about Karen, other than she ran the HOA like a drill sergeant with a law degree. She'd fined a neighbor for leaving Halloween lights up too long and forced another to repaint their shutters because the shade of blue wasn't subdued enough. That night, Ryan emailed the HOA, polite, straightforward, to individuals trespassed across my farm property today. Please advise your residents to avoid using my land as a shortcut. He attached a map showing his property lines and the HOA boundary. He expected an apology, maybe a follow-up. What he got instead came 2 days later in the mail. An official-looking envelope, HOA letterhead. "Dear Mr. Mathers, your fencing presents a visual obstruction and does not meet Oak Crest aesthetic standards. Failure to remove or replace the fencing may result in fines." Ryan blinked. His property wasn't even under HOA control. He pulled out the county parcel map again. Oak Crest's boundary ended just behind the last house. His barn, fencing, even the cattle trail set beyond it. The message was clear, though. Karen had no intention of acknowledging his complaint. Instead, she turned it into an accusation. Ryan shook his head, annoyed, but not surprised. Some people couldn't admit they were wrong, they just doubled down. The next morning, he spotted the same 2 women again, this time with a third chatting and laughing as they strolled straight through his pasture. One of them paused to take a selfie by the pond. Ryan walked out again, this time recording on his phone. "You're trespassing again," he said firmly. "I've asked you not to cross my land." "Talk to Karen," one replied without turning. She said, "You're just being difficult." That night, Ryan installed trail cameras. What he saw made his blood boil. Karen's sisters, and now what looked like her friends, had made his land their hangout. Wine glasses, picnic blankets. At one point, one woman even parked a luxury SUV under his walnut tree. His land was becoming their shortcut and their social club. So Ryan printed screenshots and sent them to the HOA with a renewed warning. Still, no response. Then, on Friday morning, he woke up to a different kind of message, spray painted across his back fence in bright orange letters. "Trespassing works both ways." Ryan stood in silence, heart pounding. This wasn't about walking pots anymore. This was about control. And Karen, HOA president or not, had just declared war. Ryan drove straight to the HOA office the next morning. He didn't want to fight, he just wanted peace. He brought printouts, maps from the county recorder's office, clear as day, showing his property sat completely outside the HOA boundary. He also printed photos of Karen's sisters on his land and the spray paint on his fence. But when he arrived, he was told Karen was unavailable. He waited in the lobby for over an hour. Finally, the office door opened, and there she was, Karen Barrington, platinum blonde hair, pastel blouse, and the kind of smile you'd see on a courtroom prosecutor who already knows she's won. "Well, Mr. Mathers," she said, barely glancing at the paperwork in his hand. "Is there something I can help you with?" "I'd like you to advise your residents to stop trespassing from my land," Ryan said. evenly. I've sent emails, I've attached evidence, and instead, I got a citation about my fence. Karen exhaled slowly, like she was already tired of the conversation. Your fence is unsightly. It faces our community and diminishes the aesthetic value of the homes bordering your pasture. It's a concern. I'm not in the HOA, Ryan replied, holding up the map. You don't have any authority over my property. Karen folded her arms. You border us. The board reserves the right to take action if a neighboring property affects home values. Ryan stared at her. So your sister's trespassing on my land isn't a problem, but my fence is. Karen's voice hardened. Your tone isn't helping. Ryan didn't raise his voice. He didn't storm out. He just folded the papers, placed them on the counter, and walked out the door. By Monday, 3 new letters had arrived. One from the HOA attorney claiming that Karen and the board had opened a file on his impact to the community. Another from the Oakcrest Co-Enforcement Committee, citing his lack of natural barrier aesthetics. And the third was marked final warning with no further explanation. He felt a pressure in his chest he hadn't felt in years. The kind of stress that makes you clench your jaw at night and grind your teeth without realizing it. But then the camera footage arrived. Ryan checked his trail cams on Tuesday morning. The trespassing had escalated. Karen's sisters had returned now. With folding chairs, they had a small group of women with them, wine bottles, laughter. One of them dangled her feet in his irrigation canal. And then it got worse. A gray SUV Karen's. He recognized it from previous HOA meetings. Pulled up to the back trail and drove along the edge of his property, right along the split fence. It slowed near the walnut tree and sat there, engine running. Ryan took screenshots, added timestamps, and emailed them again to the HOA. This time, no response at all. So he posted them to the community Facebook page, not to shame anyone, just to say, plainly, what was happening. Here's who's been crossing my land without permission after multiple requests to stop. This is private farmland, not a shortcut or social club. The post went viral in the neighborhood group within hours. Neighbors began commenting, I always wondered how they got back there. Wait, that's not part of Oakcrest. I got a violation for a flagpole, but this is fine. But it wasn't just neighbors who saw it. That night, Ryan found a rock in his mailbox. Wrapped around it was a note. You're making this worse for yourself. He called the local sheriff and filed a formal complaint for harassment and trespassing. They said they'd document it, but without identifying the person who left the note. Their hands were tied. Still, Ryan wasn't backing down. He installed 2 more cameras, changed the locks on every gate, put up fresh signs warning against trespassing under penalty of prosecution. The next day, something new happened. Karen's sisters didn't come, but Ryan spotted a black Range Rover, one he hadn't seen before, circling the cul-de-sac. It stopped briefly by the fence line, then quietly drove away. Something was shifting, and Ryan wasn't sure what was coming next, but he knew it wouldn't be subtle. Ryan didn't sleep much that night. Between the note in his mailbox, the constant violations, and now strange vehicles scoping his property, his quiet life had turned into a slow-burning pressure cooker. He hadn't asked for this fight, but Karen had made it clear. He wasn't dealing with a neighbor. He was dealing with a bully with a clipboard and a network. By sunrise, he'd already made up his mind. No more warnings, no more emails, no more hoping reason would prevail. He called his friend Mitch, who ran a welding company, and by the end of the day, a 6-foot steel gate was bolted across the old cattle trail that bordered Oakcrest's back cul-de-sac. This wasn't a flimsy farm gate, it was reinforced, heavy duty, with a keypad lock and CROSSBARS. Then he posted laminated notices at every corner of his property line. Private property, nitrogen monoxide trespassing. ALL activity monitored by video. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Next came the signs, bold red letters, placed just inside the view from the Oakcrest sidewalks. A clear message to anyone who thought about stepping through the wire fencing again. Neighbors noticed immediately. By noon, a woman jogging by stopped and took a picture. By the following morning, Ryan got the first voicemail. Karen, double quotes, Mr. Mathers, this is President Barrington. Your new structure violates the shared access path used for drainage and emergency access. You're in clear violation of community safety standards. I strongly advise you to take that gate down, nor will be forced to act. Ryan played it twice. There was no drainage path, no easement, no shared access, just a field, a cattle trail, and a boundary that was never supposed to be crossed. That night, he installed floodlights on motion sensors. Every trail, every gate, every blind corner was lit up like a prison yard if anyone so much as took a step near the property. Then came the retaliation. First, the noise complaints. A formal letter from the HOA citing agricultural equipment operating at disruptive hours. Ryan's tractor hadn't moved in days. Then, the tree citation, a tag zip-tied to the base of the old oak tree near his driveway, bright yellow, stamped with the oak crest insignia. Citation, tree blocking line of sight from community entrance. Must be trimmed or removed. Ryan stared at the tag like it was a joke. That oak tree had been planted by his grandfather. It wasn't blocking anything. It sat 20 feet back from the road, near a bend where oak crest didn't even have street access. The next morning, he saw a landscaping truck parked across the street. Men with clipboards stood next to it, looking toward his tree. Ryan walked over. Can I help you? The man looked nervous. We were contracted to provide a quote. Karen said this tree might be violating safety codes. Ryan folded his arms. You so much as touch one branch of that tree, and I'll have a deputy here in minutes. It's not an oak crest. It's not on HOA land. And it's not your job to do her dirty work. They left without argument, but later that day, someone dumped a bag of garbage over his fence. Then another. Over the course of the week, 5 separate instances, empty wine bottles, fast food wrappers, even a used diaper once. Karen never responded to his calls. Ryan stopped trying. Instead, he documented it all: photos, dates, camera footage. He stored every video clip on a hard drive and backed it up to the cloud, just in case, because it was no longer just about land. This was about harassment, about ego, about Karen needing to prove she could control everything even outside her HOA jurisdiction. And while Ryan didn't seek confrontation, he wasn't afraid of it either. So when he saw Karen's sisters return again one afternoon, walking along the fence line, clearly looking for a new gap to sneak through, he didn't yell, he didn't wave. He just watched, because next time they crossed, he planned to do something they wouldn't forget. The sun had barely passed noon when Ryan heard the engine. A slow crunching of tires over gravel, not from the road, from the trail. He stepped out onto his porch, a rag in one hand, wiping the oil from his fingers after tightening a valve on the tractor. He squinted toward the gate and that's when he saw it. A silver Lexus SUV, nose first in the tall grass. The back end was still on the HOA pavement, but the front wheels were clearly deep on his side of the property line, right where the old opening had once been before he installed the steel gate. The driver's door opened, and out stepped Karen Barrington. She was in heels again, clicking awkwardly on uneven gravel and wearing sunglasses too large for her face, as if they could shield her from accountability. Ryan didn't move. He leaned against the porch rail and waited. Karen walked forward, arms folded, posture stiff. Mr. Mathers, your gate is interfering with emergency access. That's a violation. Ryan raised his voice only enough to be heard. There is no easement here. No emergency access. You know that. Karen gestured sharply toward the SUV. I was inspecting the area after a community complaint about blocked access. And now I'm stuck because your gate is. She stopped. A faint hissing noise whispered from under her Lexus's hood. Ryan didn't flinch. Sounds like your radiator's cooking itself. Karen snapped her head toward the vehicle, her face tightening. It's your uneven terrain. This isn't made for vehicles. No, Ryan said dryly. It's not. That's why it's marked private. That's why I locked it down. That's why it says no trespassing in 4 different places. Karen tried the ignition again. The engine sputtered and coughed. Steam began to rise from under the hood. You might want to pop that open, Ryan offered. She didn't reply. She kicked her heel into the dirt and opened the hood with an angry yank. Steam puffed out like a kettle. A mechanic wouldn't be needed to confirm it. She'd overheated the engine. Ryan stepped down off the porch slowly. Come, deliberate. Not to help, just to observe. Karen turned toward him. Are you going to help, or just stand there? He stopped 3 steps away, just outside the fence line. You remember when your sisters crossed through here and you said it was fine? When I sent you pictures, emails, county maps, this is a community issue. Karen snapped. I was doing my job. You're parked on my land. You ignored property lines. You ignored warnings. Now, you want my help? Her voice dropped into that cold, polished tone she used at meetings. You're escalating something that doesn't need to be a conflict. Ryan gave a small shake of his head. You made it one the day you turn a complaint into a violation notice. She pulled her phone from her bag. I'm calling the sheriff. Go ahead, Ryan said, nodding. I'll show him the footage. You know the drill by now. Karen hesitated, jaw clenched. She clearly didn't want law enforcement involved again. Last time hadn't gone her way. She settled for calling a tow truck. Ryan walked back up to the porch and sat on his rocking chair, sipping water as Karen paced by the overheated SUV like it was some great injustice done to her personally. When the tow truck arrived an hour later, the driver was laughing by the time Ryan showed him the property line markers. She drove in on a cattle path. He muttered, with that suspension. Karen said nothing as they hooked the SUV. She stood stiff as the truck reversed back onto the Hoare road, her Lexus dangling like a misbehaving child in timeout. Before she left, she turned to Ryan, her voice slow and curt. You think you've won? Ryan looked her dead in the eyes. I don't want to win, Karen. I want to be left alone. But as the tow truck rumbled away, Ryan knew better. Karen wasn't the type to let go. And now, she was embarrassed, which meant things were just getting started. The following morning, Ryan woke up to the low hum of whispers in Oak Crest. Not literal whispers, but the kind that travel faster than any HOA newsletter ever could. Karen's car towed off Ryan's land like a stranded dog. It was the neighborhood's new favorite story. He didn't post anything about it. He didn't have to. Someone else had filmed the whole scene. A neighbor named Brian, lawn care guy, always outside, always watching, uploaded a 30-second clip to the Oak Crest community Facebook group with the caption, Karen's emergency inspection ends with a tow truck. It had over 200 comments in an hour. Some sided with her, but most didn't. About time someone stood up to her. Wait, she drove onto his property. She fined me for wind chimes last year. Glad someone gave her a taste of it. Ryan didn't gloat. He wasn't built that way. But it was the first time since this nightmare began that he felt a small shift in power. Not victory, just balance. That afternoon, man Ryan had never met came to the edge of the fence and whistled. Hey, you're Ryan, right? Ryan walked over cautiously. Yeah, I'm Lou. I live over on Pine Hollow. Just wanted to say, been watching this whole thing play out. You're handling it better than most would. Karen fined me for having my garage door open too long. Not even joking. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Appreciate it. But I'm not looking to start a war. Lou chuckled. Too late. Man, she already thinks she's losing one. Later that evening, Ryan got another anonymous envelope in his mailbox. No note inside. Just a printed photo. It showed his back gate, the one Karen had driven past with the lock on the ground. The metal latch looked like it had been tampered with. He ran out to check. The lock was still in place, but the shackle was scratched. Not broken, but tested. Someone had tried. He installed another camera. Then he called the sheriff again, not to file a report, just to make sure they knew he was documenting everything. What he didn't expect was who showed up the next morning. Karen, again, this time on foot. With a clipboard in hand and a tight, forced smile on her face, Ryan met her halfway up the driveway. "I'm not letting this go any further, Karen," he said flatly. "Don't come onto my land again." She held up the clipboard like a shield. "This is a formal HOA letter. I'm delivering it by hand. You could have mailed it. This is more delicate," she said. Ryan took the letter without opening it. Karen stayed quiet for a second too long, then said, "You've created a hostile environment, Mr. Mathers. Multiple residents have complained about the tone of your signage. You're fostering fear. And that doesn't align with Oakcrest community values." Ryan blinked. "Fear? You mean my no trespassing signs? After you let your sisters walk across my field for weeks, your response has been disproportionate," she said coolly. "You're escalating things. I'm defending my land. There's a difference." She opened her mouth, then closed it again, frustrated. She turned on her heel and walked off. That's when Ryan finally opened the letter. It wasn't just a complaint. It was an ultimatum. Remove all signs and obstructions along the Oakcrest boundary line within 72 hours, or the HOA will pursue formal legal intervention on behalf of the community. He read it twice, then pinned it to the inside of his shed wall right next to a copy of the county property map. Later that day, another neighbor came by, this time. It was Mrs. Dillard, an older widow from 2 streets over. She brought cookies. "I saw the post," she said. "Karen's out of control. You let me know if she tries anything else. People are starting to talk about replacing her." Ryan smiled politely, but inside, his stomach twisted. Because when people like Karen feel power slipping, they don't go quietly, they double down. And sure enough, 3 nights later, Ryan's camera caught someone climbing over his gate in the dark. Not one of Karen's sisters, not a neighbor, but Karen herself, carrying a flashlight and something tucked under her coat. The footage was clear. Time-stamped. High definition. No room for debate. Karen Barrington, HOA President, enforcer of bylaws, self-appointed guardian of community values, climbing over Ryan's locked gate at 11:43 p.m. on a Thursday night. She wasn't dressed for a walk. Black sweater, gloves, a flashlight in one hand. In the other, a red aerosol can. Ryan stared at the screen in disbelief as the trail camera rolled. Karen walked the edge of the fence line, stopping at each of his no trespassing signs. She aimed the can and began spraying black paint, thick lines completely, blotting out the warnings. Then she crossed into the pasture, walked 20 feet toward his shed, and paused. She looked around, then sprayed something across the barn siding. The camera angle didn't catch all, but Ryan could tell this wasn't accidental. It was deliberate, calm, calculated. She didn't panic. She didn't rush. She vandalized his property like she was filing paperwork. By the time she climbed back over the gate, the clip was 9 minutes long. Ryan didn't say anything the next morning. He didn't call her, didn't post the video. He just made a fresh pot of coffee, fed his dog, then drove to the sheriff's office with the footage on a flash drive. The deputy at the desk watched the whole clip twice. "You want to press charges?" Ryan nodded once. "Yes, trespassing, vandalism, harassment, whatever fits." "Do you know her?" Ryan smirked. "We're well acquainted." An hour later, a cruiser pulled into Oakcrest Estates. And for once, it wasn't for Ryan. Karen tried to spin it. The official report said she claimed she was investigating a safety hazard and believed the property was public utility land. She even tried to invoke emergency oversight authority, citing vague HOA bylaws. But none of it held up. The sheriff's office issued her a citation for criminal trespass and property damage. Nothing that would land her in jail yet, but enough to stain her record. And enough to spread like wildfire. By Friday afternoon, everyone in Oakcrest knew. Some watched from their porches when the sheriff's cruiser escorted her home. Others whispered at the mailbox, but the whispers had changed. They weren't fearful anymore. They were curious. Hopeful. Someone had finally stood up to her. And won. But Karen wasn't finished. That night, A new letter was taped to Ryan's mailbox. This one wasn't from the whore. It wasn't even typed. It was handwritten. Sloppy, angry, your problem, you think you're smart. But this isn't over. That land isn't worth what you think it is. You're surrounded. Ryan read it twice, then slid it into a plastic sleeve and added it to the growing folder he kept in the shed. Copies of every complaint, every message, every incident. He wasn't paranoid. He was prepared. The next morning, something strange happened. A young woman, in business casual, walked up his driveway, clipboard in hand, clearly out of place among the hay and gravel. She introduced herself as Taylor, Knox County Zoning Office. She said she'd received an anonymous request to review potential code violations involving non-permitted structures on Ryan's land. Ryan blinked. You mean the barn? It's been here since the 1970s. She looked uncomfortable. The complaint says there may have been recent modifications, possibly without inspection. Ryan sighed, rubbed his jaw. You want to see inside? She did. So he gave her the tour. No modifications, no violations, no issues. By the time she left, she looked embarrassed. I'm sorry, she said. We get these from HOA letters a lot. People with grudges. Ryan thanked her anyway. But something clicked. In his mind, Karen hadn't just been trying to intimidate him. She was trying to bury him in paperwork, create a wall of nuisance, of confusion, of red tape, weaponizing the system. So he made a decision. No more defense. It was time to go on offense. He emailed the footage of Karen's vandalism to the entire HOA board, not just her, along with a statement. If this behavior continues, I'll file for a restraining order. I'm prepared to seek legal damages, and I will bring this before the county board if needed. That same night, 3 neighbors knocked on his door. Each had a story. Each had a fine, a threat, a complaint from Karen. All of them wanted to talk about something Ryan never expected. A petition. To remove her. It was beginning. The pushback. The power shift. But before Ryan could truly grasp what was unfolding, something happened that flipped everything upside down. Something that revealed Karen's true motivation and changed the entire fight. Ryan had barely sat down with his morning coffee when his phone buzzed. The name lit up his screen. Lou from Pine Hollow. Ryan, Lou said, voice low, like he didn't want anyone around him to hear. You've gotta come see this. It's about your land. 15 minutes later, Ryan was standing in Lou's garage, flipping through a stack of HOA planning documents spread out across a workbench. They were dated, some over 10 years old, and scanned copies Lou had saved from when he served briefly on the HOA board before quitting out of frustration. Lou pointed to one paper, an overhead map of the Oak Crest development. See that? He said, tapping a faint gray line that ran directly across Ryan's pasture. Ryan squinted. What am I looking at? That, Lou said, was a proposed emergency access road the HOA pitched to the county when the neighborhood was first built. It was never approved. The county rejected it for cutting through private land. Ryan frowned. My land? Exactly. But Karen, she's always believed it should have gone through. She's been trying to push it back onto the table, quietly, for years. Ryan's mind spun. You're telling me all this harassment, the trespassing, it's because she wants to revive a road plan that was need a decade ago? Lou nodded. And you're standing in the way. Suddenly, everything made sense. The spray paint, the fake citations, the zoning inspection. She wasn't just targeting him for control. She was setting the stage to claim he was an obstruction, to convince the board that his land was a public nuisance that needed to be reclaimed. And her sisters, they weren't just wandering, they were surveying. Ryan spent the rest of the day digging through county records. He visited the recorder's office, sat with maps, pulled parcel files, and eventually found what he needed. An easement filing from 11 years ago denied and closed. It had been proposed under the name OCE Community Access Route B, and it was clearly and ambiguously marked never approved due to clear encroachment into privately owned agricultural land. There it was, in black and white, Karen's master plan, dead before it ever started. But she never let it go. Instead, she'd been laying the groundwork in secret. Her long game wasn't about signs or fences. It was about control of the land beneath them. That night, Ryan held a quiet meeting at his barn. 8 neighbors came, including Mrs. Dillard, Brian the long guy, and even Taylor Knox from zoning, who admitted, off the record, that Karen had made 14 separate complaints against Ryan in the past 6 months alone. It was a pattern, harassment disguised as regulation. Ryan brought out the easement map, passed around copies of the denial. Everything she's done leads back to this, he said. She wanted a road through this farm. And I told her no without even knowing the full story. She's been trying to push me out since. Brian leaned forward. What if the rest of the board doesn't know? They don't, Luke confirmed. I guarantee it. If they did, they'd have to report it to the county. She's been running this solo. Taylor folded her arms. So expose her publicly. Show the community what this is really about. Ryan didn't sleep much that night. He was caught between fire and gasoline. He didn't want to become the kind of guy who blasted everything online. But this wasn't just a feud anymore. It was calculated. So, the next morning, he wrote a post on the Oakcrest Facebook group. Simple, direct, attached were the maps, the denied easement, and a copy of Karen's trespass citation. Here's what's been happening. Here's why. I'm not in the horror, but I've been harassed, vandalized, and surveilled because I wouldn't let someone build a road across my property. Enough is enough. It spread like wildfire. Dozens of comments flooded in. Old board members, former neighbors. Some were furious. Others were stunned. One comment stood out the most. This is grounds for removal. Petition coming soon. Ryan read it twice. Karen's iron grip was slipping, and this time, it wasn't just him fighting back. The neighborhood was turning. By Monday morning, the HOA clubhouse parking lot was full. Cars lined the street. Neighbors stood along the sidewalk with folded arms and quiet murmurs. Ryan didn't usually attend these meetings. He'd always preferred the quiet of his farm to the fluorescent chaos of horror politics. But today was different. Today, he wasn't the outsider. He was the spark. The board had called an emergency session in response to the firestorm Ryan's Facebook post ignited. The easement maps, the trespass footage, the spray-painted barn, the denied road proposal. It was all laid bare for the first time. Karen wasn't in control of the narrative. Inside, Ryan sat near the back, just behind Mrs. Dillard and Lou. Up front, Karen stood at the podium, looking paler than usual. Her words were precise, but her voice trembled beneath the polish. I've acted solely in the interest of Oakcrest's long-term safety and cohesion, she said. The access road proposal was a matter of vision, strategic vision for our neighborhood. Yes, I may have overstepped, but only because no one else was willing to protect the future of our community. A murmur passed through the room. Ryan didn't rise to speak. He didn't need to. The HOA Vice President, a quiet man named Greg, who'd been on the board since the beginning, stood instead. For the first time in years, he looked directly at Karen, his voice calm but firm. You hid this from the board, he said. You filed complaints, harassed a private citizen, and pushed a failed easement as if it were still active. You misused your position. Karen's lips parted, but she didn't speak. Greg turned to the room. Effective immediately, the board will vote to remove Karen Barrington as HOA President. Gasps broke out. A few people clapped. Others just nodded in silence. Karen, stunned, looked around as if expecting anyone to object. No one did. She gathered her papers, turned stiffly, and walked out of the room without another word. Outside, neighbors clustered in small groups, whispering in disbelief. Some offered Ryan handshakes. Others apologized for not stepping in sooner. Guess it took the former to remind the rest of us what property rights mean, Lou joked, clapping Ryan on the shoulder. But Ryan didn't feel victorious. He felt relieved. It was over. He drove back to the farm that afternoon, stepping out of his truck with the weight of months finally easing from his shoulders. The sign stayed up, so did the cameras. But the gate, he left it unlocked for the first time in weeks, not out of trust, but out of choice. He'd taken back control. 2 days later, a quiet knock came at his door. It was Taylor Knox from the county zoning office, holding a sealed envelope. Thought, "You should have the official version," she said with a small smile. Ryan opened it. Inside were stamped documents from the county confirming once and for all that the easement proposal had been permanently voided and could not be refiled. Attached was a letter of apology from the zoning director, acknowledging the harassment he'd endured due to unfounded complaints. It was clean. Final. Ryan tucked it into the same folder that once held warnings, threats, and anonymous notes. Now, it held closure. That Saturday, Ryan hosted a small barbecue. Nothing big, just a few neighbors, burgers on the grill, and a cooler of drinks under the walnut tree. Karen's sisters were never seen again. The trespassing stopped. And as the sun dipped behind the barn, the community that once turned a blind eye now laughed, shared stories, and lingered long past dusk on his land. By his invitation, Mrs. Dillard raised a glass to him across the fire pit. "You turned the tables, Ryan, without yelling, without breaking anything. You just stood your ground." Ryan smiled, poking the fire with a stick. "Didn't want to win a fight," he said, "just wanted to be left alone." She nodded. "Well, you did more than that." He looked out at the pasture, the same field, where it all started, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like home again. And if you enjoyed this real-life drama about standing your ground and fighting back against abuse of power, hit that like button, subscribe for more stories like this, and leave a comment below. Have you ever had to face off against a ruthless HOA?